My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and the night I gave birth to our daughter, my husband wasn't in the waiting room. He wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't at the office like he said. He was 3,000 miles away, on a private beach, with another woman. I told myself it was the worst night of my life. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. Because what I found when he came back wasn't just an affair, it was a plan. A plan to take my daughter, my house, and everything I had left. He thought I was too broken to notice. He thought wrong. I met Julian Whitmore when I was 26, working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in Seattle. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like the conversation had been waiting for him. He ran a growing logistics company his father had started, Whitmore Freight Solutions, and within a year of dating, I'd left my job to help him manage the books. I loved him. Genuinely. For the first 4 years, I believed we were building something real together, a home, a future, eventually a family. When I got pregnant, Julian seemed happy. Distracted, but happy. He started traveling more for supplier meetings in the months leading up to my due date. I didn't think much of it. Businesses expand. Husbands travel. I trusted him the way you trust someone you've built a decade of memories with. My best friend, Sophia, didn't share that trust. Eleanor, he's been distant for months, she told me over coffee, 6 weeks before I was due. Distant men don't just get that way from work stress. I told her she was overreacting. I wanted to believe that more than I wanted to admit the truth. My water broke at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. Julian was supposedly in Denver for a logistics conference. I called him 4 times. No answer. I called his assistant, a quiet young man named Marcus, who stammered and said he wasn't sure of Julian's exact schedule that week. That should have told me everything right there. Sophia drove me to the hospital herself. 12 hours of labor, and the only support I had was a friend holding my hand while my husband's phone went straight to voicemail, over and over. Our daughter, Grace, was born at 4:17 p.m. Healthy. Beautiful. And her father wasn't there to see it. Julian finally called back that evening, sun-kissed, relaxed, apologizing for terrible cell service. He said he'd fly back immediately. He didn't mention where he actually was. I didn't ask. Something in me already knew I wouldn't like the answer. 3 days later, going through his suit jacket to take it to the dry cleaner, I found a boarding pass. Not Denver. Turks and Caicos. Round trip, dated exactly the week Grace was born. And a second name on the reservation, Vanessa Cole. Vanessa Cole. The name meant nothing to me at first, until I remembered where I'd heard it. She was the newly hired VP of Operations at Whitmore Freight Solutions. Julian had introduced her to me 8 months earlier at a company dinner, calling her the sharpest hire we've made in years. I didn't confront him immediately. Grief and postpartum exhaustion had left me raw, and some instinct told me that confronting him with only a boarding pass would let him talk his way out of it, the way he'd talked his way out of everything for the last decade. Instead, I did what I do best. I went back to the books. As a former financial analyst, I still had access to older shared drives from when I'd helped manage the company's accounts. I started quietly reviewing recent transactions, expecting to find evidence of the affair. What I found instead was worse. Over the previous 10 months, nearly $340,000 had been transferred out of Whitmore Freight Solutions through a shell consulting company called Meridian Advisory Group, a company that, according to public records, had been registered only 4 months earlier, with Vanessa Cole listed as an authorized signer. They weren't just having an affair. They were draining the company, my daughter's inheritance, my husband's father's legacy, into a private account, together. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something in me went cold and precise, the way it used to when I caught discrepancies in a client's ledger back at my old job. I reached out to an old colleague, David Kim, now a forensic accountant, and asked him to review the transaction trail without telling him whose company it belonged to. Within a week, he confirmed my worst fear. "Eleanor, this isn't sloppy embezzlement. This is a structured exit plan. Someone's preparing to drain this company and disappear before anyone notices." I asked him what that meant. "It means whoever's doing this isn't planning to stick around." Julian was planning to leave. Not just me, the company, the employees, his own father's name. And take everything liquid with him. I hired a family attorney, Rebecca's son, who specialized in asset protection during divorce proceedings, and quietly began transferring what legal protections I could invoke as a listed corporate officer, a position Julian had given me years earlier for tax purposes, never expecting I'd use it against him. I also reached out, carefully, anonymously, to the company's board, including Julian's own uncle, Thomas Whitmore, who still held a minority stake and had grown suspicious of Vanessa's rapid promotion. I let Julian believe everything was normal for 6 weeks. I smiled at family dinners. I let him hold Grace for photos he'd later post online, captioned "Proud New Dad." I watched him play a role, and I played mine, the exhausted, oblivious new mother too tired to notice anything. Then, on a Sunday evening, I invited Thomas Whitmore, Rebecca's son, and David Kim to the house, under the pretense of a family dinner to discuss company succession planning, something Julian himself had wanted for months. When Julian walked in and saw the three of them at our dining table, along with a folder sitting in front of my chair, his expression shifted from confusion to something closer to fear. "Eleanor, what is this?" I slid the folder across the table. "Bank statements. Meridian Advisory Group's registration documents. David's forensic report. The boarding pass." "You wanted to talk about the company's future," I said. "Let's talk about it." Thomas Whitmore, his own uncle, went pale reading the numbers. He hadn't known the extent of it, only suspected something was wrong with Vanessa's rapid rise. Julian tried to explain it away, consulting fees, restructuring costs, but Rebecca had already prepared documentation showing Meridian Advisory Group had no employees, no physical office, and no verifiable consulting deliverables. It existed for one purpose: to move money out before anyone noticed. Within a month, the board, led by Thomas, removed Julian from operational control pending a full internal investigation. Vanessa Cole was fired immediately and, facing potential fraud charges, quickly agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced liability, providing records that confirmed the entire scheme. Julian planned to finalize the fund transfers, then file for a quiet, uncontested divorce, leaving me with significantly less than I was legally entitled to, while he and Vanessa relocated overseas with the drained funds. He hadn't planned on Grace's birth complicating his timeline. He hadn't planned on me finding that boarding pass. And he certainly hadn't planned on me still having access to systems he assumed I'd forgotten about years ago. The divorce proceedings that followed were swift. With Rebecca's guidance and the forensic evidence already substantiating financial misconduct, I secured full custody of Grace, a significant settlement, and, at Thomas's insistence, a permanent seat on the company's board, a position Julian had once joked I'd never need. Julian was charged with fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Whitmore Freight Solutions survived, restructured under Thomas's temporary leadership, with new financial oversight I personally helped design. It's been 2 years now. Grace is walking, talking, utterly unaware of the storm that surrounded her first days in this world. I've told myself I'll explain everything to her someday, not with bitterness, but with the truth, that her mother didn't fall apart when it mattered most. She got quiet. And quiet, when it's paired with patience, is its own kind of strength. I still sit on the Whitmore Freight Solutions board. Thomas and I speak weekly. The company is stable again, stronger in some ways, built on oversight that didn't exist before. Julian writes occasionally, asking to see Grace more, apologizing in ways that feel more like negotiation than remorse. I respond only through my attorney now. If you're going through something similar, If the person who was supposed to stand beside you during the hardest moment of your life chose to be somewhere else, I want you to hear this clearly. Your pain is not weakness. And your silence, while you gather what you need, is not surrender. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one already holding the proof. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. More true betrayal and revenge stories are coming every week. Tell me in the comments, would you have confronted Julian immediately, or waited and built the case like Eleanor did? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.